welcome to episode 43 of My Doll's House Diary. Now in today's episode I'm going to be back in the guest bedroom and I want to start adding a few more accessories. So let's get started. And what I want to do today is actually finish dressing the dressing table. So we'll make some little bits of makeup and things to put on there. So let's get the dressing table into the craft room. So I think the only thing I've actually done in the guest room since the last guest room episode is attach this little glass bottle to the dressing table mirror here. And I bought this at the last miniature show I was at, this one and actually another lovely little one there, from a company called Glasscraft, who I really love, and he does all these sort of little perfume bottles but also decanters and other things like that, so do have a look at his website. And all I did was put a tiny little bit of tacky wax on the bottom of the bottle and then a tiny little bit just to attach the stopper so that that doesn't get lost. So let me move that one out of the way. And what I want to start with today is some lipstick. So as I'm sure you know, lipstick comes in different cases, so I'm going to go for a square case. And I've just measured one of mine and it's about 18mm across. So I'm using this 1.5mm piece of strip wood, and that's 1/16 of an inch. Now if you want to go for a round container or a cylinder, you could use a cocktail stick, but they're 2mm in diameter. So if you think if you times that by 12, that's 24mm. So that would be a lipstick that's going to be an inch thick. So that would be a little bit too big. So if you do want to use a cocktail stick, then just sand it down a bit first. And you can either do that by hand, just by sort of rolling it along on your sandpaper or rolling a piece of sandpaper around it like that. Or you could fix that into your Dremel tool and just hold it against a piece of sandpaper at the edge of your desk, just to narrow that down a little bit. And I know that seems quite pernickety, but these are only going to be 1/4 of an inch or 6mm long, so you don't want something that just looks like a really sort of chunky cylinder. So do have a think about that if you're going to use a cocktail stick. These 1.5mm strips can sometimes be a little bit wider. So my one side is 1.5mm, but then my other side is 2, and that's just because there's always a tolerance in small pieces of wood. So sometimes you will find that they're not an exact 1.5 square. But we're going to do a little bit of sanding. So I've just got a 500 grade piece of sandpaper here, and I'm just going to go along each side of the strip. And this is really just to smooth the wood and to make it into more of a square shape. So I'm sanding a little bit more along that wider side. That's quite lumpy, that side, so I'll do a little bit more on there. And my aim with this is just to have a little black painted strip of 6mm, 1/4 of an inch long, and then I'm going to put a little piece of gold foil around the centre, just to sort of indicate the base and lid of the lipstick. So once you're happy that you've sanded your piece of strip wood, you're happy with the shape there, what you then want to do is sand along each corner. If you look at a lipstick tube, you'll see that the corners are slightly rounded. Well, they are on the ones I've got anyway, so just have a look in your makeup drawer, in your makeup bag, and just have a look at those little details. And it's doing things like that that make, you know, a really sort of realistic miniature. It's just, you know, as a miniaturist, I'm sure you've already got that eye where you look into things and see all the sort of minute details. And that's what you want to do with smaller items like pieces of makeup. So I'm just rounding off each corner there, and I'm doing it on the long strip before I've cut it to size on purpose, because obviously it's so much easier to sand a longer piece of wood. If you cut it first, you're going to have trouble even holding onto it whilst you sand. So use a longer strip first. I'm just going to do a couple of lipsticks for the dressing table, but you might, if you're doing a shop or something, You might want to sort of prepare a whole strip and then cut it into several tubes. I don't know, is it a tube of lipstick? A case of lipstick? Not sure what it's called. Okay, so I'm happy now that that's nicely rounded off. So now we can cut that to length. So I'm just going to lay my rule alongside it like that. And then just snip that to, should actually be about 6.5 millimeters. My lipstick that I measured was 75 millimeters or 3 inches. So divide that by 12 and you get 1/4 of an inch or 6.5 millimeters. Look how small that makes them. But when you're measuring a miniature and you sort of translate it down to 12 scale, don't ever think, oh well, that looks a bit small, I'll just make it a little bit bigger. And then you're sort of using a true scale. That's what true scale is. Instead of making it bigger to make it look more pleasing, you're sticking with the actual size that it would be. And then you'll find that you get a much better result. I always remember, I might have said this before, but I always remember when I was designing my little roll top bread bin, and I just sort of had in my mind's eye the size that it should be. And when I measured it all and scaled it down, it just seemed too small, so I made it bigger. And then of course it didn't look right when I put it on top of my kitchen unit. So always stick to the sizes, even if you think that looks a little bit small. So what I'm doing now is I'm just very, very slightly rounding over the top edge, because again, if you look, the lid normally has a rounded edge. And then we'll leave that bottom nice and flat. We like a nice flat bottom, so we can stand it up. So just round off one edge, and then maybe on the dressing table we could have one standing like that and then one laid beside it. Okay, like that, and now we're ready to add some paint. And I'm going to be using this Humbrol acrylic. It's number 85, and I think it is just black satin. So that will give the lipstick tube a little bit of a shine. So I've got a ceramic tile here I'm going to do my painting on, and I've just dispensed 2 drops of the paint onto the tile. And these bottles are actually called dropper bottles, and they just sort of dispense 1 drop at a time, so they're really good for miniature work. Now unfortunately I can't sell these in my Etsy shop because you can't put them in the post, and the price of a courier far outweighs the price of the paint. So just have a look online for Humbrol acrylics and I'm sure you'll find a supplier. And then I've got here my tweezers. Now Matt very kindly repaired the tip for me because they'd flayed out a little bit. So now they're nicely, tightly together. So I'm actually going to hold on to my piece of stripwood with my tweezers, and I've got my small detailing brush. That sun's bright. And then just apply the paint, and in the centre there is where I'm going to be putting the foil. Excuse me, the foil. So I can just dot a little bit of paint under them. So once you've got a bit of paint on, you can just sort of loosen the grip on the tweezers and move it along a bit, and then go over your, or any sort of bits you haven't covered. Like that. I'll see if I can stand that up to dry. But it's not going to stick to the tile anyway, so that's alright. It wants to stick to the tweezers instead. Okay, and the other one. So I've just cut the pointed end from a cocktail stick here, and again I'm going to paint it black, and this time I'm making a little lid for a tube of foundation. So obviously this is a lot longer than I'm going to need it, but again it's just easier to paint more than you need and keep it whole, because then you've got the other end to hold on to while you're painting. Like that. So I'm going to prop that there to dry, and what I've done here, and this is so small you might not even be able to see it, let me just fold that over. So I've gone online and searched for this particular foundation in the tube. I'm just waiting for that to focus in. we are. And this scaled down is 7.5 millimeters high. So what's that in inches? That's less than 5/16 of an inch. So I put it onto a black background, and then once our little lid is dry, we can actually wrap this around in a sort of triangle shape or flared out shape to look like the tube. So my little bit I've painted for the lid is now dry. So I'm going to cut that off, again longer than I need it. Twist the blade, or twist the cocktail stick beneath the blade, that helps to sort of cut it, and keep hold of the piece that you want to keep, otherwise it might go flying off. And I've got the little label here, so just apply a bit of glue along the bottom edge to start with. And stick that on there, so you're leaving a lid probably of about 1 millimeter high. Like that. You can wrap the label round, and I've left far too much paper on there, but you're better off starting off with more than you think you're going to need. So I really like how that side's gone, and sort of twist that bit around, creating that sort of angled shape like that, and then you can trim off the excess, and then we'll just glue it all together at the back. Trim off like that. I'll put a little bit more glue underneath. If you can, sort of give it a twist around the base or the lid and make it sit right. And I don't think that's even going to stand up on its own, so I'm actually just going to glue that straight to the dressing table. So what I've done here is painted a little bit of 1.5 sheet wood, and that measures 5.5 by 5 millimeters, so under 1/4 of an inch there. And then you can't even see this because it's so small, just a 5mm square, and this is actually a Max Factor blusher. And I found the image online, and then I've just saved that to Adobe Photoshop and resized it down to fit onto my piece of wood. Like I say, the writing is completely gone, but what you could do is just use a little bit of coloured paper, if you've got some, and stick that onto your painted piece of wood. You could perhaps use coloured pencil or something like that, and just do a black border around your piece of wood. But I'm going to stick this now onto there. Stuck to my finger. Like that. So by adding it to a little piece of sheet wood, it just gives it that little bit of depth and makes it look like a little blusher box. And then once the glue has dried, I'm just going to use normal everyday sellotape and just put a piece over the top, and then it gives it that sort of shine that you would get on top of a blusher or eyeshadow box with the clear sort of acetate lid. But I'll let the glue dry off first, otherwise the tape will just pull that off. And I've sort of done the same thing here again for a set of eyeshadows. And let me show you what I've printed off. Just wait for that to focus again. So I've printed off there the coloured eyeshadows as a strip on their own. So basically I found a box of eyeshadows, or an image of a box of eyeshadows, and then just cut it down so that I just had the actual coloured eyeshadows on a strip there. And then I've done a little bit to go along the top of the box there, which says Max Factor, and then I've just got a plain gold band to go along the bottom of the box. Now normally in these eyeshadow boxes you'd have a little section for an eyeshadow brush, but because these are so small, I think we're going to spend a lot of time making a tiny brush to go in there, and we're not really going to be able to see it. So again, I've painted a little piece of wood here, and this is 9mm across, so it's 3/8 of an inch, by 6mm high, 1/4 of an inch. And this is now dry, so I'm going to cut out my little images, and then I'm just going to stick the eyeshadow onto this. Then we'll put a piece of acetate on, and then do the top and bottom little banners, and then we'll put the sellotape over the top, and that just gives it a little bit of layering and makes it look like the eyeshadows are actually inside and that the lid is on top. And you'll see what I mean once I sort of start doing it. So I've stuck my eyeshadow image right in the middle of my piece of wood there, and I'm now going to let that dry off. And I've got here a piece of sellotape, and I'm going to stick the blusher face down onto it, like that. Press that down, and then bring in your craft knife and actually trim around the tape. So I tried to get it on an edge there, but I haven't done, but it doesn't matter, just trim around using your knife. Like that. This just gives it that nice sheen. And I did say earlier about using acetate on the eyeshadow box, but I tried a piece on top and it looks a little bit too chunky. Even though the acetate is only 0.5mm, it still looks a little bit too heavy. So I'm actually just going to use like a double lot of tape. So we'll tape the shadows on, the colour bit, and then we'll put the other stickers on top and then put a little bit more tape. And this is just sticking to my fingers now. It'd be easy to go around with scissors. I thought I'd be able to get a little bit closer with the knife, but see what I mean, how it gives it that nice sort of shine on top that you would get from the lid. So that's done, so now let's go back to the eyeshadow. So I've put the sellotape over the top of the eyeshadows. I'm now going to stick the top and bottom bits into place. These are so tiny I can hardly even read the writing on there now. But I think this is the bit that says Max Factor. Put that along there like that. I'm laughing because I don't know if the writing's the right way up or not now, but then if I can't see it, other people probably aren't going to either. That's a bit slippy on there because of the tape, but then I'm going to put some more over the top. Just that bit there. And even if you sort of can't print these things off, if you haven't sort of got Photoshop for making things smaller, you can just use paints and pieces of coloured paper. As you can see, you can't really see that writing. So you could just use, like I say, some pieces of coloured paper and use the same technique. Even for the eyeshadows there, you could use some little lines of coloured pencils or different coloured paints and things. So again, once that's dry, I'll put another piece of sellotape over the top. So whilst my eyeshadow box is drying, my lipstick containers are now dry, so I want to put a little bit of gold foil around each of them. And I'm just using for that chocolate wrapper foil. So I've smoothed a piece out, and do that on a flat surface. I know that sounds silly, but even if you do it on your cutting mat, all you're doing is picking up all the little cuts and grazes in your cutting mat. So do it on a completely flat surface. And I've actually got a little drawer of foil wrappers in my unit here, so every time I have a nice chocolate I just keep the wrapper, and they come in really handy for miniature work. So I'll put that back into place, and then I just want to glue this around the centre of each of the lipstick tubes containers. I'll just put a bit of glue on like that, and I'm just using my Gorilla Wood glue for all of these projects. I'm a big fan of the Gorilla Wood glue for not just wood, but fabric and paper and other things like that. So stick that round as best you can, then pick it up and sort of tighten it up with your nail. And for those of you that are fans of Chanel perfume, I don't know if you remember, but the Chanel No. 5 Eau de Perfume used to come in a black container like that with a gold sort of metal band around it. So if you wanted to have some of that on your dressing table, you could just use a bigger piece of strip, maybe the 5x5, paint it and then put that band round. And that would make a really good Chanel No. 5 Eau de Perfume. I think you find when you're doing things like this, you come up with other ideas. So I just actually pinched that off with my nail there. So that's the first one into place. A little bit sticking up at the end there. Pop a bit more glue on if you need to. I'm just going to sort of wrap it round like that. So that's one. Super easy little things to do, but I think you can sort of tell what it's supposed to be. Let's do the other one as well. So I'm now ready to attach a little bit of tape to the eyeshadow. And I've cut it off straight at one end this time, make it a little bit easier. Then you only have the 2 cuts to make. That there like that. Fold that over so I've got somewhere to put my finger. And then make the cuts. So there's the eyeshadow. So let's have a look at what we've got so far. Okay, so we've got our lipsticks, blusher, eyeshadow and foundation. And I'm now going to start gluing them into place. So I'll start with the foundation. Tiny bit of glue on the end there. I'm going to have that over there. And then when I cut the sellotape along the top of the eyeshadow, I actually pulled off a little bit of that strip. So what I think I'm going to do is hide that inside the makeup bag. So I'm going to have that sticking out like that. So if I just pop a little bit of glue onto that corner, then I can stick that in there. Wrinkle it a little bit. Give it a press. I'm just grabbing another cocktail stick just to get rid of that little bit of glue on the side there. You know, and you could do it that you have a little makeup bag that's spilling out and have it laid down on the dressing table and all of the little things coming out. That might look quite nice. I'm just sort of shaping that back into place. I hope that's going to sit in there because I'm sort of gluing sellotape to fabric. It might not stick immediately. What I'll do is just put a little bit of glue at the back so that the wood of the eyeshadow is touching the wood of the little brush there. And that should stick a little bit better. It's quite fiddly because everything's so small. That's okay in there. And then I'll put the blusher at the front there. And then let's do those lipsticks as we said about earlier. So we'll have one standing and then one laying down beside it. I want to make sure that the join in the foil is at the back of the display. Like that. And that can be our laying down one. Should we have that? I'm not sure which way to go with it. Let's go there like that. Press that down. Okay, that looks quite good. So what I want to have a go at now is some little bottles of nail varnish. So I'm going to do 3 bottles of nail varnish, and I've cut here from 1.5mm sheet wood, 1/16 of an inch, 3 pieces measuring 4.5mm by 5mm. And let me just give you that in inches. So 4.5mm is 5/32 of an inch, and 5mm is 13/64 of an inch. Now I'm actually doing the sort of old-fashioned type bottles, and I don't know if they come like this anymore, but they were sort of flat and had little shoulders. Ladies of a certain age out there, I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about. So what I'm going to do on each of these is just cut away the corners at what will become the top of each bottle. So you just want to cut some little shoulders like that. Corner. Like that, and then what you want to do is bring in your fine grade sandpaper again, and we're just going to round off the other corner, but just very gently, because obviously we want a base there to stand it on. Just sort of round off those other corners really gently. So like that, just to give them a little bit of shape. And then what I'm going to do is attach those to a piece of masking tape that I've just put on there. So standing up like that. And then to colour those, I'm actually going to use nail varnish. But I don't want to use the brush that's in there. I'm going to use one of my small micro applicators. And a new one of these so that I don't contaminate the nail varnish. First one there like that. So the only bit we're not painting here is the base, and that's obviously going to be stuck down to our dressing table. So that's those three done, and whilst they're drying I'm just going to paint the tips of 3 cocktail sticks. So I want to use this pointed end as the brush handle, and I'm going to paint these again using the black acrylic. So again, leave your cocktail stick whole while you're painting it. It just gives you something to hold on to. But you really only want that sort of end. I'm probably doing about 6mm there, 1/4 inch. And you could do the handles in white if you wanted to, or gold if you've got a nice gold paint, or perhaps a gold pen, you know, gold paint pen. And what I've got here is an old washing up sponge, and I'm just going to stick those in there and leave them to dry. So my nail varnish bottles and brush handles are all now dry, and what I've done here again is just go online and print off some little labels, and again they're so tiny, and what that actually says is Mavala, Switzerland, and it's, I don't know if it'll even focus in. Oh, it is. Just, you can just vaguely see that there. And these are just less than 4mm across, so just slightly narrower than the actual bottle. So I'm going to cut these out now and stick one to the front of each bottle. Final one on there like that. Again, it's so small I can't even really see if I've got them the right way around. But what I was thinking you could do is use water slide transfers for things like this, so that you could do a little clear label to go on the front. I think that looks quite nice. What we'll do now is stick the little brush handles into place. So with these you just want to cut the brush part, or the point of the cocktail stick, to about 4mm long. Again, roll it along under the blade like that, it helps. And then just stick it to the flat part between the shoulders of the bottle. Tiny bit of glue on there. And press that down on there. Now these don't actually stand up on their own, so again I'm going to glue them into place. I think I'll have those over there by the jar of cotton wool balls. I think that looks really nice. So I'm going to leave it there for today. I may add something else to the dressing table. You know what I'm like, I don't like to leave too much space, but again I don't want to overcrowd it as it'll take away from the detail that we've already got there. But maybe a little jewellery roll, or perhaps even a little fabric covered diary, a little notebook or something like that, just something to make a little bit more of a feature over this side. But what I want to do now is go and put this back into place in the guest bedroom. I think that looks really nice. So another thing I've actually done in between episodes is to build this blanket chest. And I had a bit of that lovely silk fabric left, so I've used that for the cushion there, and that will match really nicely then with the headboard in that room. And I made this little blanket box following the tutorial in my book, Making Doll's House Furniture in 1/12 scale. And I've got a whole section of bedroom furniture in there. There's the original blanket box that I made. And you're probably familiar with my books. I know a lot of you tell me that you've got one or all of them, which is lovely, so thank you for that. But if not, all of the tutorials are laid out like this with a photograph for every step, so they're really easy to follow. And that's the sort of range of bedroom furniture there, and it's a really sort of lovely, elegant looking range of furniture, so I thought that would look really nice in the guest bedroom. So let's go and pop this into place. So I'll just pop that there at the end of the bed. I think that looks nice. We've got quite a lot of room at the front of the bedroom here, so I wanted something there just to fill it out a little bit more. And of course I will be having a rug in this room, but I just haven't really had time to get that started yet, but obviously I'll be doing sort of tutorials for all of those as well. And then I've just put a little vase of roses up there, and that's just fixed with tacky wax, so that's just temporary. I may move that either down into the chimney breast opening, or, you know, onto the little chest of drawers or something like that. I think that looks really nice as well. So that's it for today's episode, and I really hope you've enjoyed this. I love making all of the little accessories, little bits and pieces. And again, as always, this is just a guide. You don't have to do what I've done, but hopefully I've given you a few sort of tips and ideas of ways that you can do things. But just as I said earlier, just have a look through your makeup drawer or your makeup bag and really look at things and think about how you can replicate those in 12th scale and what you can use to do that. You know, you don't have to use wood, you can use card, a thicker card for the sort of eyeshadows and the blusher boxes. You might want to do a powder compact or even just a loose powder box. And if you do have a go at making any makeup or toiletries, I would love to see what you do. So do share your photographs in the group, little bits and pieces by you. And I'm sure you're all members by now, but if not, just pop over to my Facebook page. There's a link below and you can request to join from there. Okay, so thank you for watching, and I'll be back with you again soon for another episode of My Doll's House Diary. So until then, take care. Bye.